today we are creating Under the Snow artwork. For this project, you'll need a couple of things. First off, I have thicker paper for this project, and I have two pieces. So notice also it's a little bit longer in length, portrait-wise. So if you can manage, awesome. If not, as always, you can use your typical paper, whatever you can manage. You'll also need a pencil with an eraser. You'll need watercolor supplies, so your watercolor palette, your watercolor cup with your brushes, and a paper towel, as well as something to protect the table. Something a little more unique you'll need for our watercolor techniques today, I have a little bit of table salt, masking tape, and then a few other things. You'll need either a pen or permanent marker. You can use either maybe like a white paint pen or some white paint, scissors, and then for this you can use any other coloring supplies you want in this project, other than, you know, when we're using our watercolor. But for this project, you don't want to use any washable markers. You want to avoid washable markers because if any water touches it when we're using our watercolors, it will mess it up. So you can use things like crayons or color pencils. These are permanent kind of paint markers. What you have is what you can work with as long as it's not washable markers, okay? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with kind of our top paper, our top layer. We are going to create kind of a line in our snow. So we're going to have a very large bottom portion that's going to be our main focus. And this bottom portion is going to take up about 2/3 of the artwork. So the first place we're going to start working a little bit is preparing the top of our paper, which is going to be the area that's above the snow. So we need to kind of create a snow line, and then we're going to use this top paper as kind of a protection of the bottom area as we work a little bit at the top. So about 2/3 of the way up. So this is about 1/3, 2/3. So right around here, I'm going to create kind of like a wave line that's going to represent this line on the snow to separate the bottom from the top. So, all right, so we have our line. What we're going to do is we are going to actually cut this line with our scissors. This is really the only time you need your scissors for this. So I'm going to cut this line. Once I cut this line, I'm going to discard kind of that small part for now. Then I'm going to kind of stack it up with my paper since they're the same size. Make sure their corners are meeting at the bottom. And I'm going to take my pencil. I'm going to trace this line onto my back paper. And this is actually going to be the final paper back here. So I'm going to be now using this as protection for my back paper. Now that we're working in the snow a little bit, we're going to be using a watercolor technique to create trees, kind of like birch trees in the winter. So we are going to use our masking tape. And we don't need them super long because they're actually going to be kind of lining up at the top to kind of block off some areas where our trees will be while we're using watercolor. So I am going to kind of eyeball, like, how big does it need to be? And I'm going to stick this up top. Now, some things you want to consider is you can kind of go in. You can make the trees kind of narrow out a little bit. You don't want them too jagged. But if you're kind of, with your fingers kind of peeling down, now that we have our tape down for our trees, we're going to use our watercolors to create kind of this winter wash around these trees. I'm going to stick with more kind of blues, maybe a little yellow or green. The blues is best though, since it's just kind of like a winter theme. Let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to use our water. Like I said, we're going to jump in with mostly our blues, and we're going to kind of create these horizon lines in our background. Now, the nice thing, how this watercolor technique works, is this masking tape is going to protect the paper in the areas where our trees will be. So I'm just going in with these quick kind of wash layers. What's also nice is we have our protection at the bottom with our top paper, so that it does not get on our bottom area. Notice we're using a good amount of water on this. It's going pretty quick because of that. If we're using less water and it's not wanting to move around, you might need just a little bit more. All right, now that we've added kind of a wash of some colors in the background, we're being a little careful, especially if our paper isn't that thick, because if we continue to go over this, it might create kind of some holes, and I guess still a little too rough on the paper. Mine's even starting to do it, even though my paper's a little thicker too. So what I'm going to do now, I want to make sure I have a decent amount of water on here overall. That's why I am running over it just a little bit more. And then we're going to be using one last technique for now on this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my salt. So I'm going to pick up some salt. And I am going to just carefully sprinkle it over where I have applied the watercolor down and it's still a little wet. So the most important thing when I sprinkle this on there is I am not going to touch it after that. I'm going to let it sit here. What it does is it kind of moves and absorbs the watercolor in some area and kind of gives this kind of like sprinkly effect. So it's pretty cool. But like I said, once you put it down, you want to make sure you just kind of leave it there. You don't want to try to move the salt around with your finger. Okay, now that I have kind of cleaned up my saw, I put away my tape and my scissors. What I'm going to do very carefully, because this is still wet, I'm going to pick up this bottom layer. I'm not going to get rid of it because we are going to be using it again here shortly, but I'm going to kind of use it to start to guide my masking tape up off the paper. This is where it is probably very helpful if you're a friend who is able to have a little bit of a thicker paper, because you want to do this carefully. It can rip the paper underneath, and you also don't want to move around that salt too much. You just want to try to lift the tape up carefully. You do not need this tape anymore, so as you lift it, if you're needing to kind of pick it up a little more individually, if that's helping you, you can just lift it up and throw it away. We do not need it anymore. So I'm going to just carefully lift up mine, and then I'm going to throw it away. Okay, I've lifted up all of my tape. It is a little salty still, That's okay. You want it to be that way. Don't try to rub off the salt yet. We are going to come back to this section later on. So just let it continue to sit and dry for now. I am going to pick up my paper from the bottom. I'm going to set this to the side because we are going to use it again later. But for now, I am going to move into my bottom area. So this area is going to represent kind of the snow and under the snow area. And for this, we are going to be using animals, specifically animals that tunnel under the snow during the winters. Animals like mice, voles, squirrels, rabbits will use these tunnels and create kind of burrows to keep them warm during the winter and keep them safe from predators that they're hunted by, such as owls and foxes and wolves. So we're going to use our pencil for quite a bit of time, and we are going to kind of create the snow, maybe show a little bit of the tunnels going down, and then an area underneath or near these tunnels that represent kind of the living space for one of these animals we might want to represent. Whether it's mice, voles, squirrels, or rabbits, we're going to use our imagination a little bit and create kind of a home for them. So let's jump in. This is where our artwork is going to start to probably look even more different. So I really want to encourage you to kind of create their home space or pick one of those animals a little more unique to your own choices and your own creativity. So first off, I want to kind of maybe represent some more kind of layers to my snow. So I could put in a little more lines to represent kind of underneath. I could even go in and start to draw in some tunnels that are kind of leading to this space that I am going to kind of fill in large. It's going to take up most of the space, and this space is going to be where my animal is living under the snow. So notice I'm kind of going in pretty light with my pencil. Reason for that is because if I make any mistakes or want to move any lines, I can do that. Okay? So now that I have kind of my snow, I maybe have a tunnel. You could even draw some more cool tunnels, maybe tunnels that are connected. And then this large open space for where I'm going to put my kind of fantasy or imagination home for my animal. So my animal of choice is going to be a squirrel. But I'm going to be drawing my squirrel. I'm going to be drawing kind of like a fun home for the squirrel down there. So you are going to do the same. I am going to put a little bit of a time lapse. You're going to see some of the things I draw into my home. You are more than welcome to draw some of them as well. But this is where I really want you to take the time to use your own creativity, imagination, and your ideas. And then maybe pick whether it's the mice, the vole, the squirrel, rabbit, or something similar in here to create their home. So we're going to have some unique things going on. I'm super excited to see some differences out there. It is okay to now go online maybe and look up some ideas with your learning coach so that you can get some different things in here as well. Okay, let's get started. we have drawn in our animal home in our tunnels, what we're going to do now is we're going to use our coloring supplies, whether that's our watercolor or our colored pencils or crayons, and we are going to fill in the color beneath the snow. And I want to encourage you, as you can, to maybe go over some of your pencil lines with the black marker if possible. Remember, you don't want it to be washable here, especially if you're using watercolors, just because we want to try to transition maybe some from our pencil lines to more of a more finished look, which will be from a pen or a permanent marker as you're working a little bit. So I'm going to jump in, and I want you to jump in too. Alright, once you have completed your bottom portion of Under the Snow, we're going to go back to the top. At this point, it should be dry. So we're just going to kind of lightly cover this, especially if it might be kind of damp. And now at this point, we can brush off some of that salt Mine is still slightly damp. That's all right. You just want to be careful, especially if yours is still pretty wet. And then what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to go in with my black marker, my pen, and I'm going to kind of go over, outline the trees, and then I'm going to put some kind of details inside of them. Once we go over these trees and add some details, we have one last step, which we're going to add a little bit of snow, and then we will be all done. Add a few kind of lines on the trees, give them some details. For the snow, right after this portion, we are going to use one of two things depending on what you might have available. You can either use your white paint, and then you'll need kind of a brush. Awesome and bonus if it's kind of like a stiff brush. If you don't have the white paint, or you maybe have like a white paint pen, that would be awesome too. If you don't have that, you could go over it with your white coloring supply, but it might not work quite as successfully. So I'm going to show you how we're going to go about kind of adding the snow with those supplies. All right, now, making sure, we really want to make sure we have this on here, that we have table protection, because this part can get a little bit messy. But what we can do is we're going to essentially add on some white paint. We can take our finger and we can go like this, and it will give us some drops of snow. So that's one option. The other option, like I mentioned, was taking that kind of paint pen and kind of going in, if it'll show up, those little dots of snow. Mine is not working as well with the paint pen. I might just need to give it a little bit of a shake. So I probably am going to go in with my paint itself. That one's starting to show up. So I'm just really just adding some drops of snow.
Once you've completed the snow, you want to make sure you clean up and don't forget your name at the bottom. Then you're all done, and I can't wait to see yours.